she was just a mechanic. Quiet, grease-stained, invisible. Until the general mocked her in front of everyone and she pulled down her collar. What they saw weren't tattoos. They were coordinates, carved into her spine. 5 minutes later, security locked down the hangar. 10 minutes after that, a black SUV arrived, and the man inside. He saluted her without saying a word. Who was Evelyn Ross, and what happened at those coordinates that changed everything? Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Redstone Air Base woke early, but Evelyn Ross always woke earlier. By 03:30, she was already on the cold linoleum floor of her trailer, knocking out 50 push-ups in perfect silence. No music, no alarms, just breath in, breath out counted in a language no one on base recognized. Her trailer sat 22 minutes from the main hangars, a weathered aluminum shell secured by 3 locks with blackout curtains that never moved. Inside, everything had its place. A single cup, a single plate. Her bed, folded so tight a quarter bounced off it twice. Tools arranged not just by function, but by frequency of use, smallest to largest, left to right, as if muscle memory needed a map. At 04:10 sharp, she ran her third weather check. No A, local radar, then a private satellite feed routed through an old Army app she never deleted. Wind out of the west, high pressure system holding steady. She took her coffee black, 2 sips, then 1 deep breath before stepping outside into the dark Nevada wind. By the time the rest of Redstone began to stir, Evelyn was already in Hangar 3, kneeling beside an F-16 with her ear pressed against the hydraulic panel. "It's singing flat," she muttered. No one had even turned the lights on yet. Most of the crew referred to her as the hydraulics whisperer. Others just called her Ghost Wrench. She never corrected either. Mechanics younger than her by a decade asked how she could diagnose pressure failures by ear, how she knew when a stabilizer was about to seize just by the way the handle vibrated under stress. She only shrugged. Machines talk. You just gotta shut up and listen. No one knew where she trained. Her resume said civilian technical school and freelance contract work. Her ID badge cleared every hangar but gave away nothing else. Just a picture with neutral expression. Brown hair pulled back, no smile, no rank, no backstory, but they noticed things. How Evelyn always checked the exits. How she positioned her tool chest to block her flank. How she flinched just barely when a wrench dropped too loud. How she scanned every room like someone cataloging threats. And how she always wore long sleeves, even when the desert inside the hangars felt like a furnace. Only one mechanic ever dared ask about the faint white scars across her wrists. Old mistakes, she'd said. Learned better. That was all. Across the base, tension had been building all week. Rumor had it that General Travis Holbrook was flying in for the annual inspection, an unannounced one. The kind of visit that made officers lose sleep and enlisted men triple-check uniforms. Holbrook had a reputation that preceded him. Precision-obsessed, brutally traditional, known for ending careers with a single word, and not known for subtlety when it came to diversity hires. The moment his jet touched down, the tension shifted from rumor to certainty. He was here. Evelyn had known it 3 days earlier, long before the internal memo confirmed it. The timing, the sudden request for full diagnostic logs, the extra shipment of backup parts, the pause in scheduled flights. She'd seen these signs before in another life. So she tried. She went to Chief Sam O'Connell, requested emergency leave. Family matter. One day, she never asked for time off. O'Connell had sighed, rubbed his forehead. "I'd approve it, Ross, but we're short-staffed. You're the only one who can handle Bay 4's hydraulic tests, and we've got 6 birds scheduled for rotation. You're too damn good at your job." She offered to trade shifts, work nights, handle backlogged inventory. Anything to avoid inspection day. No luck. The schedule was locked. Holbrook was coming, and Evelyn would be there. Inspection morning arrived under a sky the color of old steel. The desert wind carried static. and the mechanics lined up beside their aircraft like soldiers before review. Evelyn stood at the end of the row, adjusting the torque settings on an actuator when she heard the convoy. 5 black SUVs pulled into Hangar 7 like a presidential motorcade. Doors opened, polished boots hit concrete, and then, like a sudden pressure drop, silence. General Travis Holbrook stepped out in full dress uniform, 4 stars gleaming against desert light. His gait was deliberate, chin high, every motion rehearsed for maximum intimidation. Behind him, aides followed like shadows, Lieutenant Mason Kerr among them, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning everything. Holbrook wasted no time. He strode through the line of mechanics, inspecting gloves, tools, even the grit under their fingernails. When he reached Evelyn, he paused. "Name," he said, not looking at her face. She stood slowly. "Evelyn Ross, sir." His eyes drifted up, down, paused on her chest, no ribbons, no insignia, just oil-stained coveralls, civilian badge. "A woman, tell me." "Ross," Holbrook said, his voice echoing under the steel rafters. "What qualifies you to handle a multi-million-dollar aircraft? Is it a certificate from some online mechanics course? Or just the right quota box checked?" No one moved. Tools stayed frozen in midair. The air around them seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn didn't respond. She turned back to the actuator, retightened a bolt by feel alone. Holbrook stepped closer, boots landing like warnings. "I asked you a question, mechanic. Do you even know what it means to serve? Or are you just another symbol of how far we've fallen?" Still, no reply. But something in her jaw clenched. Kerr shifted awkwardly behind Holbrook, eyes flicking between them. He'd never seen anyone ignore the general like that and live to tell the story. Holbrook raised his voice, projecting it outward for everyone to hear. "Real service comes with sacrifice. Ross. With blood. Not brake fluid. What have you ever sacrificed? A manicure?" Evelyn turned her wrench one last time, then stood up slowly. She wasn't tall, but her presence filled the space like someone who didn't need height to dominate a room. She reached behind her neck with both hands, pulled her collar down just enough to reveal the upper part of her spine. Silence. There, etched into the skin, not tattooed, but carved, was a string of numbers. Coordinates. Ragged. Precise. Permanent. Holbrook laughed. A sharp, barking sound. "Is that supposed to impress me? You marked yourself with numbers. What, a souvenir from Burning Man?" But behind him, Kerr didn't laugh. He stared at the numbers, eyes narrowing, recognition dawning in the form of a quiet, visible fear. He tapped on his phone without permission, fed the coordinates into a secure military database. His breath caught. 34.7 north, 69.2 east. Kandahar province, Afghanistan. His pulse spiked. Before he could finish reading the dossier fragment that popped up just one line, redacted everything else, he saw the code name, Ghost 7, and the classification tag non-releasable, level black, confirmed asset. Kerr looked up just as Holbrook stepped closer to Evelyn again, unaware of the storm he'd just unleashed. "Cute scar," the general said, "but symbols don't fix jets." Evelyn didn't move, didn't blink, but her gaze locked onto Kerr's for half a second. She saw it in his eyes, the recognition, and she knew. The past wasn't buried deep enough. Not anymore. Lieutenant Mason Kerr didn't hear the rest of General Holbrook's inspection remarks. He barely registered the clack of polished boots moving away from Evelyn Ross. The numbers on her spine had rooted themselves in his mind like a virus that wouldn't stop replicating. He found a quiet alcove between hangars 6 and 7, ducked behind a tool locker, and opened his secure comms app. The database query he ran was encrypted, routed through 3 internal firewalls. His fingers hovered before typing in the coordinates he'd just seen. 34.7 north, 69.2 east. The result came back with a red header level black. Access restricted. But one line had been left visible, almost like a warning. Ghost Protocol 7 status asset lost. Presumed KIA. Operation sealed. Do not pursue. Kerr's throat tightened. His father had once whispered stories about Ghost Protocol during long nights when duty had kept them at the base late. The kind of stories that ended in silence, missions that never made headlines, operatives who didn't return, or worse, did, but no one could know. He reread the coordinates again, then the initials G7, and his mind refused to accept it. Because that woman grease-stained, soft-spoken, silent Evelyn Ross couldn't possibly be. And yet the scars were real, the numbers precise, not ink, not art, a method of preservation. She didn't want to forget, and maybe she didn't want to be found. Kandahar, 10 years ago, Captain Evelyn Ross, then known only as Operative 7, sat in a briefing tent reeking of jet fuel and stale coffee. Her face was calm, emotionless, the way they trained her. The others didn't speak to her. Ghost operatives didn't bond. They infiltrated, and sometimes they died. On the table before her sat a weathered map, red circles, green triangles, dozens of kill zones. The mission was clear in bed with hostile intelligence, feed false data, and disrupt the planned assault on Kandahar's forward operating base. Timing was everything. One wrong transmission and 50,000 people could be lost. Memorize the extraction coordinates, the handler said. If they take your gear, your radio, your name, this is all you'll have. She memorized them, then asked for a blade. The medic looked at her like she was insane. I want it on me, she said. The blade burned through layers of skin just above her lower spine. No anesthetic, no hesitation. The medic apologized with every cut. She didn't flinch once. The insertion went exactly as planned at first. She became someone else. Spoke Pashto with a provincial accent. Sold misinformation like it was candy. Let low-level assets burn so high-level networks could stay protected. She even gave up locations. Let attacks happen on lightly staffed sites to preserve the illusion. But it worked. She became valuable to the enemy. Too valuable. They stopped questioning her loyalty, started sharing plans, schedules, convoys, launch sequences. Then came the children, 3 boys, no older than 10, used as human shields in a building marked for destruction. Her handler's voice crackled in her earpiece. Maintain cover. Acceptable losses. She didn't even respond. She broke protocol, sprinted into the crumbling building, carried the youngest out on her own back. Then everything went dark. The torture that followed was quiet. No screams, just the dull rhythm of someone cataloging pressure points, recarving the coordinates on her back deeper, rougher. The interrogator knew what they were, knew what they meant, and wanted her to remember every second. 6 days later, she crawled 50 meters through sand so fine it felt like dust. She moved at night, slept under metal, navigated by star, by memory, by the burning map carved into her spine. When she reached the extraction zone, delirious, 30 pounds lighter, she wrote the entire mission report on scraps of uniform in her own blood, then vanished. Back in the present, Kerr walked straight into Holbrook's temporary office. The general was reviewing maintenance logs. What is it, Lieutenant? She's Ghost 7, Kerr said, his voice even. Sir, the coordinates. They matched the extraction zone from Kandahar, 2012. Holbrook's face went blank, then pale, then something else, regret, maybe, or disbelief. He opened his mouth but said nothing. Evelyn Ross was 20 yards away, tightening the casing on a hydraulic manifold as if none of this mattered. As if ghosts didn't walk hangars. Holbrook stood, staring out the window. We humiliated her, he said quietly. In front of everyone. Kerr said nothing. He didn't need to. Later that afternoon, a loud clang echoed from Hangar 2. One of the F-15s had failed a pressure test. The gauges spiked. Fluids hissed from the side panel like an open artery. The crew panicked, yelling over each other. Someone hit the kill switch. Someone else called for fire suppression. But Evelyn was already moving. No shouting, no drama. She reached the aircraft in under 10 seconds, slid beneath the fuselage with one wrench and no hesitation, found the ruptured line with her bare hand, closed the valve manually, a move that should have taken 3 minutes. She did it in 11 seconds, then re-emerged, arms slick with oil, and said, "Check your backup regulator. You're running mismatched seals." The entire hangar went silent. The failure, had it happened mid-flight, would have taken the jet and its pilot out of the sky. Someone clapped, then stopped. No one said her name, but from that moment on, the whispers began. Ghost. Things shifted quickly after that. Mechanics who once rolled their eyes at her silence now paused when she spoke. Kerr noticed that others began mimicking her routine checking exits before starting, logging repairs in double detail, scanning diagnostics twice before sign-off. They didn't call it training, but that's what it was, and Evelyn never acknowledged it. She just worked, fixed, tuned, and moved like someone who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. Dana Rowe, the senior supply tech, brought her an extra set of gloves one morning. "Heavy insulation," she said casually, "for when the heat gets unbearable." She didn't say it, but Evelyn understood. It was a gesture, an offering, a recognition. Words spread in low voices about the way she moved, about the way Holbrook avoided eye contact when passing her now, about the coordinates. Most of them didn't understand what they meant, but they knew they meant something, and that was enough. In the back of the maintenance bay, Kerr pulled out a blank notepad. He began sketching what looked like a flow chart, but it wasn't technical. It was behavioral. How Evelyn interacted with each person, how she stood when speaking, where her eyes went, when her sleeves rolled up, when they didn't. He didn't know what he was mapping, but he had a feeling she did. She passed behind him once and glanced down at the pad, said nothing, just nodded once, then walked away. That evening, Evelyn sat alone outside her trailer, the stars coming out in ones and twos. Her tools were clean, her hands raw, the desert air dry enough to sting. She didn't light a fire, didn't need the warmth. The silence was enough. She leaned back, letting her spine press against the aluminum wall, the scars catching faint moonlight through the thin fabric of her shirt. Ghost 7. She hadn't heard that name in a decade, but it didn't matter, because whether they remembered her or not, she remembered the mission, and she was still on it. General Travis Holbrook stood in the doorway of Hangar 3 for a full minute before saying a word. Evelyn Ross was crouched beneath a grounded F-35 tightening bolts along a pressure manifold. She didn't look up, didn't slow down. The sound of her ratchet echoed off the metal skin of the aircraft like a metronome in a war zone. Holbrook cleared his throat, but his voice was softer than usual. "I know who you are." She paused only long enough to switch tools. "I'm the mechanic scheduled for Bay 3 this morning." "You're Ghost 7, he said, firmer now. "Kandahar, 2012. Evelyn exhaled slowly, not surprised, not defensive, just tired. "No, sir," she replied. "That woman died in a classified file. You probably signed the closure yourself." He stepped forward, lowering his voice. "You saved my squadron. We were supposed to be the opening strike. We had no idea." She cut him off with a quiet, cold precision, then let it stay that way. Holbrook hesitated. This wasn't the kind of silence he could command or outrank. It was the silence of someone who had lived through things beyond protocol, beyond metals, beyond the reach of memory. "Why not let the truth out?" he asked. Evelyn stood then, wiping her hands on a rag so soaked with oil it barely absorbed anything. "Because ghosts go where heroes can't, and I'm still needed in the shadows." The second time they carved the coordinates into her skin, it was personal. Evelyn had known the cost when she broke cover. The building was already marked for destruction. Intel said only militants remained. But she'd seen the movement through a cracked window, 3 children huddled under a steel sink. One coughing, the youngest crying. She radioed her handler. Abort the strike. Civilians inside. The response came back clinical. Maintain cover. Acceptable losses. She turned off her radio and ran. Bullets tore through plaster and glass behind her. The heat from the strike team's approach, already burning the outer walls. She kicked the door open, grabbed the nearest child, screamed for the others to follow. By the time they reached the alley, the building behind them was smoke and ruin. One of the boys clung to her arm as they ran, refusing to let go even when enemy fighters gave chase. She passed the children to a civilian doctors group 2 towns over, then vanished into the dust before questions could begin. They caught her that night, bound her to a chair beneath a single flickering bulb. The interrogator smiled when he saw the old scars. "Let's reopen the story," he whispered. Evelyn came back from that mission with 2 broken ribs, a shattered molar, and a silence deeper than any briefing could explain. They erased her identity completely after that. No record, no trace, not even a closed file. She chose the name Ross from a highway sign on her way to the safe house. She chose aircraft maintenance because machines never lied, never betrayed, never asked questions. And for 10 years, she stayed buried, until now. 2 weeks after Holbrook's visit, Evelyn noticed a pattern. 3 aircraft across 3 different hangars had suffered identical hydraulic pressure failures. Different model, different crews, same failure signature. She didn't report it through official channels. Instead, she circled the affected jets during off hours, checked valves personally, logged pressure differentials by hand, found microfractures that shouldn't exist on newly installed parts. Something was wrong, and someone had made it happen. So she built a network. Not on paper, not with titles, with trust. She started with Airman Benji Morales, a 19-year-old who'd once asked how to tell if a stabilizer was lying. She showed him, then asked him to watch for inconsistencies in equipment delivery logs. Next came Dana Rowe from Supply, who'd handled munitions audits back in Okinawa. Evelyn taught her how to trace part shipments backward through inventory discrepancies. Then Sergeant Kwan from Security, quiet, alert, and unnoticed. She asked him to flag any unauthorized access to tool bays after midnight. She never said the word sabotage, never called it a threat, but they understood, and they watched. With Kerr, it was different. She didn't recruit him, she tested him. She dropped a wrench during diagnostics, watched how he reacted not to the sound, but to the motion. He'd flinched, then scanned the room. Later, she handed him a set of torque specs and asked him to find the anomaly. He did, in half the expected time. "You read machines well," she said. He nodded. "But can you read people?" She started showing him things most instructors never taught. How the way someone cleaned their tools revealed their stress level. How the speed of handwriting on maintenance logs reflected sleep deprivation. How someone who checked gauges twice but never the floor drain might be hiding something. Kerr took notes, watched, learned. He stopped thinking of Evelyn as a mechanic. She was a threat analyst with a wrench, a strategist in coveralls, a ghost. Meanwhile, General Holbrook was having a reckoning of his own. He'd begun pulling old records, quietly, carefully. Found 3 operations, his own career, highlights that had been coordinated not by generals, but by invisible hands. Hands like hers. The Pentagon refused to unseal anything. Ghost protocol. They insisted did not exist. Still, Holbrook drafted a press release, a commendation ceremony, a public acknowledgement. He planned to present Evelyn Ross with the Distinguished Intelligence Cross in front of the entire base. But she found out. She walked into his office one morning without knocking. "You're trying to resurrect something I buried for a reason," she said. Holbrook stood behind his desk, speech half written on the screen. I deserve to finish my work," she snapped. Her voice didn't rise, but it hit him like a slap. "You want a legacy? I want results. Let the dead stay useful. General." She turned and left without waiting for a reply. The cursor blinked on the empty speech behind him. Holbrook never finished writing it. That night, Evelyn sat alone in the tool bay, rerouting hydraulic lines on a training jet. Kerr approached, hesitant. He'd seen the memo, knew about the canceled ceremony. "I would have stood for you," he said softly. She didn't look up. "Don't," she said. "Stand for the next one." He nodded, and for the first time, understood. She wasn't hiding. She was positioning, and she wasn't alone anymore. It began with a spreadsheet, nothing dramatic, no explosions, just rows of maintenance data, subtly altered, suspiciously clean. Evelyn Ross had compiled it over 6 weeks' handwritten notations, pressure anomalies, component replacements that didn't align with normal wear cycles. She passed it to Dana Rowe in a sealed envelope, labeled as surplus inventory correction. Dana, in turn, slipped it to Sergeant Kwan, who routed it through a low-priority internal audit review. The sabotage pattern Evelyn had suspected became undeniable. Hydraulic components were being swapped with inferior versions across multiple aircraft types. Same failure points, same signs of deliberate degradation, designed to fail not during maintenance but mid-flight. The official investigation moved fast after that. An anonymous tip, phrased like it came from inside quality control, pointed command toward the right inventory contractor. Quiet arrests followed, internal sweeps. Several civilian suppliers were blacklisted. A cover story about supplier fraud was prepared for the press. Evelyn didn't attend the debrief. She was in Hangar 5 recalibrating a nose gear assembly on an F-22. 2 weeks later, Airman Benji Morales stood at attention in front of a modest crowd in the base's main hall. His uniform was freshly pressed, his face flushed with confusion. General Holbrook read from a commendation letter that Morales hadn't written, describing how his vigilance caught an irregularity in hydraulic part flow, how his actions had prevented catastrophic failure in flight-critical systems. Morales accepted the medal with shaking hands. The audience applauded. He had no idea Evelyn Ross had fed him the data, structured it to look like his own audit, and timed its delivery to match base protocols. She didn't need him to know. She just needed the mission to hold. From the far edge of the hangar, Evelyn watched with one hand resting on the handle of a torquey wrench. Her coveralls were stained from a morning spent fixing rudder linkages. She hadn't changed. She hadn't combed her hair. She didn't clap, but her eyes, for once, softened. Kerr stood beside her, said nothing. The medal ceremony faded. The noise settled into routine again. Planes roared down runways. Radios crackled with status checks. Ground crews returned to their stations. Everything was back to normal until it wasn't. The warning came over. The comms shouted, not transmitted. Fuel spill Hangar 4, valve breach. Fire suppression crews moved instantly, but Evelyn was closer. She sprinted across the tarmac without a word, slid under the fuselage of a tanker already hissing fumes from its belly. The hose coupling had ruptured. Raw fuel sprayed across the concrete like a lit fuse waiting for spark. She jammed her wrench into the emergency cutoff valve, twisted it hard bare hands against red-hot metal. It gave with a groan. The pressure dropped. The leak slowed, but not before a jagged shard of aluminum tore across her lower back as she crawled out, slicing fabric and skin alike. A young medic ran to her side, pulled on gloves, told her to sit. She refused. "I'm fine," she muttered, trying to stand. He caught a glimpse of the wounds as he peeled back her torn shirt, then froze, not at the blood, but at the scars beneath. Numbers, maps, cross-hatchings that weren't decorative, coordinates etched into old flesh. He didn't ask, didn't blink, just straightened and offered a crisp, silent salute. A gesture between those who've served, a language older than paperwork. Evelyn nodded back, then got up and walked away. Later, as the base settled into quiet again, Kerr found her outside the mess hall, binding her own shoulder with gauze and electrical tape. "You could have let someone else handle that," he said. She shrugged. They weren't close enough. He sat beside her, letting the silence stretch. "Finally," and he asked, Why not let them know? Let them give you credit recognition. She looked at him like he'd asked why the sky was dry. Because real heroes build trust quietly, she said, not with citations, but with consistency. He didn't respond, didn't need to. She handed him a socket wrench without looking, and he took it automatically. The next morning, Evelyn arrived at Hangar 7 before sunrise. Like always, the air still smelled faintly of jet fuel and dust. A new mechanic waited inside, nervous, maybe 19, wearing gloves too clean and boots too stiff. She approached without fanfare. Name, she asked. Parker. Ma'am? No ma'ams here. She replied, just torque specs. She handed him a checklist. Every connection matters. Every bolt. Every seal. You think it's just metal, but it's not. Someone's going to climb into this plane and trust you without ever meeting you. Parker nodded quickly, unsure if he should speak. Evelyn crouched beside the aircraft, tapped the edge of the hydraulic panel. This hum's wrong. You stop. You check. You listen. Machines talk if you respect them. Parker scribbled notes as fast as he could. Kerr stood by the wall, arms folded, watching them. He'd learned the same way. Quiet words, sharp instincts, no ego. That afternoon, Morales stopped by to return a misrouted parts binder. He caught sight of Evelyn leaning against a wing strut, wiping grease from her palms. Hey, Ross, he called. She raised an eyebrow. Thanks for showing me how to flag inventory anomalies. I think that's what helped. They gave me this, he added, holding up the medal from the ceremony. She didn't look at it, just gave a faint nod. Keep it clean, she said. Don't let it collect dust. He smiled awkwardly and left. The rest of the base never really knew. They noticed things ran smoother, fewer failures, better efficiency, but they didn't connect it to Evelyn, didn't know about the network, didn't see the pattern, but it was there. The janitor who always swept twice near munition storage, the gate guard who asked one extra question on entry, the food service worker who noted which tables changed seating patterns. Evelyn had built a shield, not with orders, but with example. One evening, Holbrook stood outside the control tower, watching the sunset paint the airfield in amber and bronze. He saw Evelyn below, directing a small team of mechanics near a C-130. Nothing dramatic, just gestures, adjustments, a nod when the job was done right. He never called her name, never summoned her for anything again. He'd learned what most never did, that some wars are fought in silence, and some heroes choose the quiet path. That night, as Evelyn returned to her trailer, she glanced at the sky, clear, no alarms, no anomalies. She slipped inside, cleaned her tools, checked her locks, and folded her coveralls over the back of a chair. The scars on her back itched beneath the gauze, but she didn't reach for them. She knew every mark by memory, every line, every reason. They weren't meant to heal. They were meant to remain. In the morning, she'd rise before dawn, check the winds, prep the flight line, and teach the next set of hands what she knew. Not about battle, not about blood, but about care, about precision, about trust. Because long after the metals tarnish and the flags fold, someone still needs to turn the wrench that keeps the sky safe. And she'd be there, quiet, invisible, still serving.